So, hi everyone, welcome to another Zoom meeting and another podcast episode. If you are watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast, you can find out more about what we're doing here, how to get involved, the online community. You can listen to the podcast, you can find out about paid private mentoring with myself if it interests you on the website, and it's www.acimwithkeith.com. Okay, so, on with today's meeting. As ever, let's begin with a quote from A Course in Miracles. This is lesson 281. Father, your son is perfect. When I think that I am hurt in any way, it is because I have forgotten who I am and that I am as you created me. Let's take that again. Father, your son is perfect. When I think that I am hurt in any way, it is because I have forgotten who I am and that I am as you created me. So the entire premise of A Course in Miracles is that you have misperceived what you are. And the Course talks about one problem and one solution to all the problems you think you have, because there's not really many problems, there's only one. You don't know what you are. You think you are a self that doesn't exist. You think you are separate. You are something different than all your brothers. And the course's name for that is special. You think you're special. Doesn't matter whether you think you're especially good or especially holy, or whether you think you're especially bad or especially awful. You think you're special. You think you're different. You think you are a self that doesn't exist, that stands apart from the world in judgment of it. This self does not exist. And the entire premise of A Course in Miracles is you think you suffer because of what's happening to the self you take yourself to be. You think you suffer because of that self's past and that self's scary future. You think you suffer because of what other selves do to the self that you take yourself to be. And A Course in Miracles says, no, that's the trap. You suffer because you take yourself to be something that you are not. All your suffering is because you think you are a self made out of thoughts that doesn't exist. That's the sole cause of suffering. You have no problem but this. That's what the miracle establishes. You are choosing to be a self made out of thoughts, which is not what you are. The pain is awful. And all that's left to you now is to find people and situations to blame for how awful it is to identify as a self that's not you. That's what A Course in Miracles is teaching. You have gone in and identified with the ego thought system playing like a radio in your mind, which has nothing to do with you, but you've jumped into it and claimed it as you. You've gathered together a bunch of thoughts, a bunch of memories, a bunch of feelings. You've lumped them into one and you've went, that's me. And that's why you suffer. That self made of thoughts and memories and sensations and feelings. There's no identity in that. That's not you. So let's take our quote again. Your son is perfect. When I think that I'm hurt in any way, it is because I have forgotten who I am and that I am as you created me. Now, the problem is you believe in the self that you've made. Lesson 93. The self you made out of thoughts is not the Son of God. Therefore, this self does not exist at all. And therefore, nothing it seems to say or do means anything. It is neither bad nor good. It is unreal. And nothing more than that. So that big mess of thoughts in your mind that you call you isn't you. Lesson 4, these thoughts do not mean anything. But you think they're you. You have all these thoughts and concepts about your past and what happened to you and what you became and what you are now and what people do. And it's all made up. It's just thoughts. It's got nothing to do with the Son of God. Nothing. These thoughts, my thoughts do not mean anything. I have no private thoughts, but it's only private thoughts of which I am aware. What can they mean? They do not exist and they mean nothing. Nothing. Now, if you go trying to fight those thoughts in your mind, you're making nothing into something. You're making a big deal out of it. You're going, oh, look at these thoughts. This is very bad. Shouldn't have any thoughts. Got to fight these bad thoughts. Got to fix them. Got to change them. Nonsense. You've made the error real. Thoughts are nothing. Looking like something, but still nothing. There is no identity in them. They are not your thoughts. They do not belong to anyone. They are happening all by themselves. There is no one there thinking them. That one is a concept of a self that's not there. It's not you. It's not you. But when you jump into those thoughts that don't mean anything, that don't exist, that mean nothing, and you think they're true, and you think you're thinking them, you believe you're a self that doesn't exist. Conceptual self. Who has good things and bad things and guilt and inadequacy and striving and seeking and resisting and grasping and grievances and desperately trying to solve the problem of itself and its misery, and nothing works because it's seek and do not find. And none of that's you. It's thoughts. That's it. Thoughts. That's it. Of course, the miracle says, I can be hurt by nothing but my thoughts. Now, that's not because thoughts are powerful. That's not because thoughts are evil. That's not because thoughts can do anything to you. It's because you're making a big deal out of them. It's because you're looking at a big pile of thoughts going, that's me. See that thought? I thought that thought. No, you didn't. No one did. They're happening all by themselves. There's nobody there in control of anything. There's no such thing as a separate self. The atonement states separateness never happened. So look around you. All of this is the light of heaven looking like a world of broken pieces, whether they be bodies or thoughts or feelings or stories or memories, all the broken pieces. And it's still heaven. Well, it's still the light of heaven. That's all that's here. the reflection of heaven's light appearing as a dream of broken pieces, discrete objects, but it's all the same light. You are that. Course in Miracles says, you are the light of the world with me. That does not mean the self you've made up out of thoughts, your conceptual identity, the body with a story, is somehow the light. No, that is what's veiling the light from you. Course in Miracles says the concept of the self, me, this conceptual self, with this concept of a past and a concept of a future and a concept of body identification and a concept of everything else, the concept of the self stands like a shield, a silent barricade against the truth. The truth. It bars it from your sight. All things you see are images. You don't see the holiness, the emptiness, the unknowable, hearing as images, and still the holiness, the unknowable Son of God. You've made the images real because you think you're an image. You think you're a body. You think the thoughts in your mind are you and you're thinking them, and that you're moving through time and that you're trying to become something. They're all concepts. That one is a concept. That's a self that doesn't exist. It's made of thoughts. It's not you. You exist, but you're not that. And the practice of A Course in Miracles says, I don't care what is happening at this moment. If you're not experiencing peace, you think you're an illusion of yourself. That is why you're not peaceful. And now you're just blaming other people and situations and the body for why you're not peaceful. But that's not why you're not peaceful. You're not peaceful because you think you're something that doesn't exist. Concept, a story, a self made of thoughts that is not the Son of God. You are not that, and neither is your brother. We need to understand this well. It doesn't matter what's happening in the world, happening with the body, happening with other people, happening in the country, happening in other countries, happening in politics. If you're not perfectly at peace, it's because you think you are an illusion. Now, the trap, having chosen this painful, self-imposed limitation on yourself, this concept of what you are that is not what you are, now you will seek to medicate it with magic. You will say the problem is in the world. The problem is what the world is doing to this self I take myself to be. The problem is what the world is not doing for the self that I take myself to be. I need to solve the problem of the world. I need to grasp at things in the world and hold on to them in an attempt to medicate how painful it is to identify as this imaginary me made of thoughts. And I need to desperately push away bad thoughts and bad feelings and bad situations and get them the hell away from me in an attempt to be happier as this me abomination that can't be happy. It's magic. It says I am in the world and the problem is in the world and the solution is in the world. If I can just get this, if I can just succeed at that, if I can just get that person out of my life, if I can just get that person into my life, this will medicate the me. This will cause the me to be happier. This will be salvation. And A Course in Miracles is saying you're fooling yourself. That me cannot be happy. That me stands like a shield, a silent barricade before the truth of what you and your brother are as one, and bars it from your sight. All things you see now are images, real images. These are real things. And I'm going to seek at them and resist them, grasp at them and hold grievances with them, have special love with them and special hate with them in order to make the me feel better. How's that working out for you? Have you found lasting happiness? No, because none of that's the problem. You don't need to add anything to yourself, and nothing can take away the happiness of what you are as God created you. But you can believe you are an illusion. And as this painful, self-hating, self-loathing, frightened, terrified illusion of yourself, you will be busy seeking salvation in the world that will never come. Seek and do not find. The cruel maxim of the ego. Make a self up for yourself out of thoughts. This is what you are. You're not the son of God. You are this concept, this story with a past and a future, and you can make it better in the world. No, you can't. Nothing will ever fill the gaping hole of emptiness. You will spend all your time fighting with people and situations and thoughts and feelings and chasing after experiences and people and thoughts and experiences, desperately trying to medicate the me, desperately trying to attain lasting happiness. And all you will have is fleeting moments where the mind shuts up and there's a glimpse of what you truly are. And then it will just fall like water through your hands. Because the mind will start up again with thoughts, with concepts, telling you who you are with thoughts, with concepts. Nothing the mind tells you that you are is what you are. It's all lies. So we must understand the premise of A Course in Miracles. You will be out there blaming the world, blaming your body, blaming the aging process, blaming financial circumstances, blaming your partner, blaming your friends, blaming your neighbors, blaming the dog, the cat, whatever you can blame for how awful it is to identify as me. But guess what? You can't be unhappy. It's not possible. It's not possible for you to be unhappy. And you've no control over that because you didn't create yourself. You were created by love, in love, to be love. That's what you are. You don't get a choice about that. Now, you can believe a lie about yourself, that the insane voice talking to itself in your mind is you. That voice in your head is not you. That's the ego, and the ego is not you. Those thoughts in your mind, you're not thinking them. They don't mean anything. They don't exist. They're nothing. So everything they tell you about what you are and your brother is are a lie. So if there is suffering, you are identifying as an illusion of yourself that can suffer. It doesn't matter what you're blaming for the suffering. The problem is you can't suffer. Therefore, there's only one problem. It's nothing that's happening in the world. It's that you think you're a self that can suffer. but you're not. That's not possible for you. So you must be misidentified as a painful illusion of yourself, a me that's desperately trying to medicate itself with attack and hatred and special love and cannibalization. That's your problem. That's your one problem. You don't have to do anything with the world. Seek not to change the world. Seek to change your mind about the world. It is not the cause of your problems. The me is the cause of your problems. The me you take yourself to be, which is not what you are. Separate self. One that exists because God's oneness has been destroyed. Non-duality is no more. This me was birthed, which is separate from God and separate from everyone else. And it's miserable. All it knows how to do to try to medicate how miserable it is seek and resist, grasp and hold grievances, special love, which is just cannibalizing other people to feel better about itself than me. It's not unconditional love, it's conditional love. And special hate, making up enemies so that they can be to blame for your suffering instead of your own decision to identify as an illusion, to get involved in thoughts and make a self for yourself out of thoughts, a self that is not the Son of God, and then go blaming. You did this to me. I was a perfectly happy me until you came along and said that. That me was never happy. It's not. It's constantly grasping more, more Netflix, more alcohol, more cigarettes, more sex, more power, more money, bigger house, more friends, more influence, more holy. That's the biggest scam of the whole lot. More, 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 more. Something to take away the pain of the me, which is never happy, which is never still, which is seeking and resisting and seeking and resisting and seeking and resisting and medicating itself. Medicating itself with experiences, with substances, desperately trying to dull the pain of the me. And nothing works. But of course, Miracle says, no, this will work. See that me? That's not you. You can't suffer. You can't be unhappy. So this is A Course in Miracles. Nobody else is responsible for the unhappiness that you're experiencing. And the lack and the wanting that never ends. Nothing is responsible for that, and nothing will fix it. Because the one that's wanting and needing and hating and holding grievances and grasping and seeking doesn't exist. It's an illusion of yourself. It's a bunch of thoughts that you think are you. It's not you. It's not you. Physical body, that's not you. It's an appearance. It's got nothing to do with you. It's an appearance of you, nothing to do with your identity. Everything is an appearance of you. And the mental body, the mind, the individual mind, that's thinking. That is thinking. That's not you. That's nothing as well. It's another appearance. You're a different kind of a mind. You're not that. Those thoughts don't mean anything. They do not exist and they mean nothing. So do not do anything about them. Why would you do something about an illusion, an appearance? The minute you go fighting it, going, oh, I need to have no thoughts, I need to get rid of my thoughts. No, now you've made them into a problem. They're not a problem. They're nothing. They're not you. It's got nothing to do with your identity. Problem. Thoughts are not the problem. Identification with thoughts. That's the problem. You think you're thinking. And when you think you're thinking, you think you're a self that doesn't exist. And the suffering will begin instantly. And now the hungry dogs of fear are sent out at an unconscious level, going, bring me back stuff I can blame for the suffering of the me, so I don't have to look at the fact that my identification as this me is the real reason I'm suffering. That's what's going on. Let's take another quote. This is lesson 31, section 7, paragraph 12. Whatever form temptation seems to take, it always but reflects a wish to be a self that you are not. And from that wish, concept arises, teaching that you are the thing you wish to be, a separate self, a thinker of thoughts, a creature of time with a guilty past and a victimized past and a frightening future where death is looming. It's a concept. Those are thoughts. Nothing to do with you whatsoever. And from that wish to be a separate self, concept arises, teaching you that you are the thing you wish to be. It will remain your concept of yourself until the wish that fathered it no longer is held dear. And that means until you realize that all your pain is coming from what you take yourself to be and not what's happening in the world. Not what happened in the past. Not what will happen in the future. Not what's happening in the body. It will remain your concept of yourself until you realize the only problem is what I am taking myself to be. That is the cause of all my pain, and everything else is just looking for patsies. So I can keep my separateness, I can keep my individuality, this self made of thoughts, who's different than my brothers, but I can blame other stuff instead of the decision to be the thing that is the cause of all your pain. But while you cherish it, this self made of thoughts that thinks it's thinking, you will behold your brother in the likeness of the self whose image has the wish begot of you. Because you think you are a body, an insane voice talking to itself, which isn't you, but you're going, this is me, I am this. And the ego is so sneaky because the ego could say into your mind all day, you're such a loser. You're never going to get this. You're never going to break your addiction to thinking. You're never going to be a good course student. The ego could do that. See? But the ego is much sneakier than that. The ego says, I'm such a loser. I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to break my addiction to thoughts. I'm never going to find the holy place where thoughts can enter not. I'm never going to awaken. See, it uses I, and you think it's you. It's not. It's not. That's the sneakiness of the ego. Those thoughts aren't you, but they are placed in the first person. So you think they are. They've nothing to do with you. And your only problem is that you think that they do have something to do with you, that you're thinking them. Lesson 8. When I think I'm thinking, my mind is actually blank because it's not really thinking at all. Because you're not thinking them. Sure, there's an appearance of thoughts and they're harmless. It's just another appearance, like the body, like the world. It's totally harmless. It's just an appearance. Except you identify with it and believe in a self that doesn't exist, a separate self, a body with a story, past and a future, a concept. And now you look on your brother and you see him as an illusion, like you see yourself. You see your brother as a body. You're using concepts to understand what he is. You're using thoughts to make up a self for him. So you can hate that self and blame it for your unhappiness instead of your own decision to identify as an illusion. Or you can cannibalize that self that you've made up for your brother. You can go, what's in it for me? Would having him in my life, would that cure the me? Would that make the me happier? That's not what your brother is. It's not what you are. It's not what your brother is. So A Course in Miracles says you have attacked the Christ in you to identify as an illusion, and you look out at the light of Christ everywhere, and you attack Christ again to see him as other selves that now you're making up, to hate or cannibalize, to try to medicate the me, which is in such bad pain. And A Course in Miracles says, my brother, you can choose again. The fact that you're seeing your brother as a creature of time, lacking, needing, wanting, guilty, evil, means you saw yourself like that first, a self that doesn't exist. Now you're just projecting that out onto the Son of God and saying, oh, he's like me. Only he's worse. He's guiltier than I am. So God will kill him first. Those selves don't exist. The self you made for yourself doesn't exist. It's just a big lie made of thoughts, a big house of cards made of thoughts. It's not what you are. And now you look on your brother and you see him as this big mountain of lies, thoughts. It's not what your brother is either. You see your brother as you see yourself. But while you cherish it, the desire to be a separate self, a body, something that stands apart from the world and your brothers in hatred, while you cherish that, you will behold your brother in the likeness of the self whose image has the wish begot of you. For seeing can but represent a wish, because it has no power to create. So the self you've made up for your brother, that's not what your brother is. You're just deluded because you think you're a self that you're not. And instead of correcting that, undoing your mistaken decision to be an ego, you're busy blaming your brother. You're not even blaming your brother. You're blaming the self that you've made up for your brother. And A Course in Miracles goes, no, 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 this is really simple. There's only ever one thing you do when you're upset. You make another choice about what you are. So this is from chapter 31, section 5, paragraph 14. The concept of the self. This is the one that stands like a shield, a silent barricade before the truth and bars it from your sight, that makes you see images as real, and then you go about cannibalizing them or hating them. Concept of the self. What I am, what my thoughts tell me I am, what the mind tells me I am. The concept of the self has always been the great preoccupation of the world. Who am I? What's my zodiac sign? What's my Myers-Briggs test results? You know, you can go on to Facebook and you can do tests on what kind of a carrot you are, whatever, okay? Everyone is obsessed with who am I? What am I? What kind of a person am I? You're not a person at all. A person is a body with a story, a concept. Everyone believes that he must find the answer to the riddle of himself. Salvation can be seen as nothing more than the escape from concepts. Mark that well. Salvation can be seen as nothing more than the escape from concepts. You already are as God created you right now, except there's a bunch of thoughts and concepts in your mind that you're taking seriously. You're like, oh, look at these thoughts. Look what they tell me that I am. Look how lacking they tell me that I am. Look what they're telling me in the world will make me whole. Let me chase that moving goalposts until disillusionment has me chasing a new one. Let me cannibalize that person. Let me blame this person for all my suffering. Concept. None of that's true. It's just a big bunch of thoughts. It has nothing to do with you. You already are as God created you. You're just identifying with the ego's thoughts and thinking they're yours and totally misperceiving what you are. And from that misperception, you look out on the world and the light is kept. The light of God's Son is kept from everything you see. All you see are images, and now you make up selves for them with your thoughts. You've made a self up for yourself out of thoughts. Now you're going to make up a self for everyone else out of thoughts and hate them or cannibalize them. And it's all madness. None of it's true. It's just a virtual reality world. Course in Miracles calls it your private world, made of thoughts. Salvation can be seen as nothing more than the escape from concepts. So whatever thoughts, whatever that trickster mind that you have been thinking is you, whatever that tells you you are, is a lie. Because what you are cannot be conceptualized, cannot be known with thoughts. And in the same way, when you look on your brother, whatever thoughts tell you your brother is, are all lies. Your brother, like you, cannot be conceptualized. It doesn't matter what thoughts tell you your brother is, that's a lie. Your brother is outside of concepts. They have no power over him. Thoughts can say nothing about what your brother is. Thoughts can say nothing about what you are. But whatever they say isn't true. Because you cannot be limited by a thought. You already are as God created you. There's nothing for you to become. Nothing. As long as you think you're trying to become something, like holy, enlightened, awakened, a miracle worker, okay, concept, all right? As long as you're trying to become something, you don't know what you already are. You think you're an illusion, And as the illusion, keeping the illusion of yourself, you're trying to become something better. And all the while, you're already at the finish line. So, what is it to awaken? It's to awaken from conceptual identity. It's to awaken from the nightmare that thoughts can tell you what you are and tell you what your brother is. You are awake when you don't know what you are. It's enlightenment. It's the escape from concepts. Because that kind of knowing is the ego's knowing, where there's a knower and the known. That's the ego's knowing. It's not real knowing. It's nonsense. It's just a virtual reality world. It's the matrix made out of thoughts. You're awake when you don't know what you are. When the story's gone, the story made out of thoughts, the concept of me, the innocent victim. When thoughts are gone or disbelieved, they don't need to be gone because they're nothing. When thoughts are gone or disbelieved, you're awake. You are the holy place where thoughts can enter not. They have no power here. That's what you are. That's what you are right now. Except you keep thinking you're thinking. You keep thinking the mind is you. It's not. It's not. It's the ego. The ego is just a thought system. It's nothing. But you think it's you. You think what the mind is doing is you. It's not. You're not the body, and you're not what we call the mind. You're a different type of mind. An abstract, non-specific, impersonal mind. And that's the truth of everyone. But you think that personal mind, that insane voice talking to itself, that doesn't exist and means nothing, you think that's you. And therefore you think you're lacking and that you need to go on a journey to become holy. But those are concepts. You already are holy. You just think the mind is you. It's got nothing to do with you. It's an appearance of what you are, as awareness, as presence. It's an appearance of what you are. There's no identity in it. The whole world is an appearance of what you are as the light of the world. Right now, you are the light of the world. Not the self made out of thoughts, the one that thinks it's a body, that thinks it has a past and a future and is trying to become holy. That one doesn't exist. Those are just thoughts. It's not you. You are the light that is in everything. There is no self apart. There is one self everywhere. That's what you are. Everything else is just a big bunch of thoughts that you think are you, and it's not you. So whenever you think you're thinking, that's why you're suffering. You think you are the imaginary self that's thinking the ego's thoughts. That self isn't there. Now the suffering is terrible, and you have to go and blame your partner for leaving the seat down and go, look what you've done to me. Look how you've upset me. Or the cat for urinating on the carpet. Now you can go, oh my gosh, that is terrible. Okay? Because you made a self for yourself out of thoughts. You think you're thinking. You think you are this self concept. The suffering is terrible, and you need guilty dream figures to blame for how awful it is for you to jump into the only thing that can hurt you, thoughts. And you put on thoughts like clothing to make a self for yourself, an innocent victim. It doesn't exist. It's not you. It's a bunch of thoughts. It's not you. Thoughts have nothing to do with what you are. Salvation is nothing more than the escape from concepts. All you have to understand is that a thought can't tell you who you are. Now, it's only private thoughts of which I'm aware. All day long, they're going to go, you're such a loser. Why would anyone want you? You know, you've never done anything. You can't succeed at anything. Nothing goes right for you. Okay. Doesn't even do that. It goes, I am such a loser. That's what the ego is saying. That's not you. The ego is going, I'm such a loser. Nothing has ever gone right for me. I'm such an innocent victim. That's the ego talking. And you're going, oh my God, yeah. Look at this. That's got nothing to do with you. You can't lack. You can't want. You can't suffer unless you jump into thoughts and believe them and think you're thinking them. You're not thinking them. The ego is thinking them. And there's no ego demon. It's just a thought system that plays. It's an appearance in the world of appearances. It's got nothing to do with you. You are the light that's appearing as all appearances, including thoughts and feelings and emotions and memories. Everything in the world isn't what you discover outside of thoughts is that everything you ever thought you were is made out of what you actually are, which is pure awareness, pure present moment presence without a past or future. Those are concepts, thoughts. One problem. You think you're separate. You think you're a self that doesn't exist, and now you're blaming something. That's what A Course in Miracles is saying. Chapter 28, Section 4, Paragraph 3. Like you, your brother thinks he is a dream. Thinks he has a past and a future. Thinks he's lacking and needing and wanting. He thinks he's a me. And he's desperately trying to medicate himself with special love and special hate. He's trying to attack people to feel better about himself. He's trying to cannibalize people to hold them in his life and make them like him in order to fix the me. He thinks he's a dream as well. And he's made up a self for himself out of thoughts, and he's in pain, just like you. And now you're making up a self for himself out of thoughts as well. So you've made a self for yourself out of thoughts. Because you've attacked yourself as Christ like that, you will attack Christ in your brother to see him as a self that you're making up out of thoughts. And the self that you've made up for out of thoughts for your brother is not the self he has made up for himself out of thoughts. It's completely different. And neither of those selves exist. None of the three selves exist. Not the one your brother has made up for himself out of thoughts, not the one you've made up for yourself out of thoughts, and not the self you've made up for your brother because you made one up for yourself. None of them are real because they're all concepts. Concept can't tell you anything about what you are or your brother is. They're just thoughts. They don't mean anything. Salvation can be seen as nothing more than the escape from concepts. Seeing your brother without concepts and knowing yourself to be without concepts. The self you made out of thoughts, concepts, is not the Son of God. The self your brother has made for himself out of thoughts is not the Son of God. And the self you've made up for your brother out of thoughts, that's not the Son of God either. Because there's nothing can be said about the Son of God. Thoughts can't say anything about that. Thoughts cannot limit the Son of God. And one Son of God shines as the truth of everyone. Like you, your brother thinks he's a dream. Share not in his illusion of himself, for your identity depends on his reality. Is he a self made of thoughts that's thinking with a past and future? If you think that, you must believe the same about yourself. Think rather of him as a mind in which illusions still persist, but as a mind which brother is to you. He is not your brother made by what he dreams. The self he's made up out of thoughts. Nor is his body, hero of the dream, your brother. So your brother's body, the image of his body, and what that body is saying and thinking and doing, that's not your brother. Those are concepts. It is his reality that is your brother. The changelessness, the stillness, the peace outside of thoughts that thoughts can't touch. That's your brother. And until you know that's the truth of your brother, you cannot know it of yourself. So again, it is his reality that is your brother, as is yours to him. Your mind and his are joined in brotherhood. His body and his dreams but seem to make a little gap where yours have joined with his. Where your false self seems to make a gap between the false self you've made up for him and the false self that he's made up for himself. But there's no gap. Because one, changeless, holy, unknowable with thoughts, Son of God, is true everywhere you look. So within the one consciousness that's here, there are little pockets of imaginary me's, a bunch of thoughts that seem to make a me, a bunch of concepts. But there's only one consciousness here. Your job is to know that that's the truth of everyone. But you're going to have to undo your belief in the me lie. Bunch of thoughts you call me. That is what stands like a shield, a silent barricade before the truth of one consciousness here, and blocks it from your sight, and makes you see all the images as real with separate selves. Guilty the lot of them. That's not what's here. It's all thoughts. Salvation can be seen as nothing more than the escape from concepts. The self that you think you are does not need to become holy, does not need to become on a journey, does not need to go home to God. You have to undo your identification with concepts and realize that you are what God is, and so is everyone else. The me's were never real, they were concepts. One light shines as everyone and everything, and that light is unknowable. So when you're trying to become something, you don't know what you are because you already are as God created you. The false self, the me, is trying to solve the problem of itself and its misery by becoming holy. That's not going to work. You have to get rid of the me delusion. You have to look at the big pile of thoughts that you think are you and go, that's not me. Because I am the unknowable. That's where the peace is that surpasses all understanding. Outside of concepts and thoughts that mean nothing. And when I discover it inside myself, and I'm no longer making a self for myself out of thoughts, the peace, the stillness that's here is everywhere. I only ever see the world as I see myself. If I look inside and see a self made out of thoughts, I have to look out and see a world of people made out of thoughts that I've made up, concepts. When I look inside and I see the unknowable, something a thought can say nothing about, pure stillness, pure peace. It doesn't matter what thoughts are doing. Don't do anything with that. What's that got to do with you? You're the holy place that thoughts can enter not. And once you look inside and see this, you look outside and that's what's everywhere. You see your brothers without concepts because you saw yourself without them. You're no longer attacking what you are with thoughts, and you're no longer attacking what your brother is with thoughts. And you discover everything is one, everything is the same. The forms, the broken pieces seem to take me nothing for the whole, one unknowable, changeless, still Son of God is what's appearing as everything. And the everything is nothing. It's an illusion, but it's still the one wholeness everywhere. The forms, the broken pieces seem to take me nothing, for the whole is in each one, and every aspect of the Son of God is just the same as every other part. In Zen Buddhism, they say emptiness is exactly form, and form is exactly emptiness. Now, don't understand emptiness to mean empty of thoughts. It is, but that's not what emptiness is. You want to understand emptiness as unknowable with thoughts. To the mind, that's nothing. That's emptiness. Okay, but what does the mind know? So, what we're really saying is that the unknowable, the light of heaven, is everything. And everything is this unknowable with thoughts, light of heaven. Freedom from concepts, escape from concepts. So, chapter 9, section 4, paragraph 1, accept as true only what your brother is if you would know yourself, because you're both the same light. Perceive what he is not, and you cannot know what you are. You've made a self up for himself out of thoughts. You wouldn't have done that unless you made up an imaginary self for yourself out of thoughts first. And now you're going to try and cannibalize or blame your brother, or rather the self you've made up for your brother. Remember always that your identity is shared and that its sharing is its reality. Here we come to salvation. All your suffering comes from thinking you are a separate self when separateness never happened. And salvation then is letting go of all the concepts of a self, an imaginary self made of thoughts, to discover what you are outside of thoughts and understand that's what everyone is. This is shared identity. When you think you're special, when you think you're something different than what your brother is, better course student, a worse course student, better person, a worse person, that's delusion. You think you're a separate self. You're not. That's a self made of thoughts. That's got nothing to do with you. It's a bunch of thoughts, and you're going, look at this bunch of thoughts. That's me. Look at this concept here. That's me. No, there's no concept about what you are. You are the quiet center. You are the stately calm. You are the holy place where thoughts can enter not. That's what you are. And the minute you look inside and go, that's what I am, you look outside and go, oh my God, that's what everyone is. You see, you see, you are not just the silence in your mind, the stillness, the unknowable. You're not just that. You are the stillness, the silence, the holiness, and the unknowability that is everything and everyone. That's why A Course in Miracles says the temple of the Holy Spirit is not the body, it is the relationship. If you look inside and go, oh, look, I'm so enlightened, I've crossed the bridge, I'm fabulous, let me tell you about how fabulous I am, tell all you plebs, oh, if you're lucky, you can get like me if you live long enough. That's nonsense, that's delusion. It's a separate self, that's a self concept. You're deluded, you're spiritualized ego. No, no, no. When you know what the Son of God is, he's everywhere. You don't just discover the quiet center, the holy place where thoughts can enter not. Now you look out and it is everything and everyone. There are no separate selves. There is one quiet center, one stately calm, one holy place that thoughts can enter not, and it is appearing as all the world without ever ceasing to be itself. Everywhere you look, you are. Everything else was delusion. It was just a big bunch of thoughts. So, what do you need salvation from? Identifying with thoughts, taking them seriously, dressing yourself in them, making up stories about yourself. This is the concept of me. This is the kind of carrot I am. What kind of carrot are you? Concept. That's what you need salvation from. Your thoughts. And not even your thoughts, just identification with them, thinking you're thinking them, thinking the voice in your head just because it says, I am a loser. Just because it says that, you go, oh my God, look at that thought I just had. No, you didn't. It's not you. It's a concept. It's nonsense. It's crap. You have to stop believing thoughts. There was a tiny mad idea that there could be two. There could be God and me. And that led, that thought, that's all that is a thought. It has no reality. It's a thought. It led to thoughts of sin, guilt, and fear. If I really am this me that's not God, I must have killed God. I must be guilty. And I'm going to have to be terrified that he's going to come back for his revenge. All these thoughts are lies. Okay. One wrong thought, like the first line on a maths equation, you got it wrong. There is separateness. There is otherness. There's two. There's duality. You got it wrong. And everything, every other line of the equation, as you come down the ladder, is wrong. If there's not two. And out of separateness, sin, guilt, and fear comes all the rest of the thoughts in your mind. Oh, I'm a me and I'm surrounded by other me's and they're the guilty ones and it's not me. And I could be happy if everyone just did what I wanted and if the world was run the way I think it should be ran. And if everyone else would just stay away from me, except for the ones that I want to cannibalize, if they just come close to me, all this is lies. All these are thoughts. None of them are true. And all you need to be saved from is concepts. That's why A Course in Miracles says you still think you're understanding is a powerful contribution to the truth and makes it what it is. Yet we have said you need to understand nothing. All you have to understand is that there's nothing to understand. The atonement can be equated with total escape from the past and total lack of interest in the future. What's the past? Bunch of thoughts. What's the future? Bunch of thoughts. What's here in this moment that has nothing to do with past or future? Heaven. Heaven. Moment can be equated with a total escape from the past, which is nothing but a bunch of thoughts. Total lack of interest in the future, with a bunch of thoughts. Heaven is here. There's nowhere else. Heaven is now. There's no other time. It's here all along. It's just covered up by you thinking you were thinking. And thinking you could understand truth with your thoughts. And thinking your thoughts were your friend. And that they could help you. Going, what are my thoughts? What is my brother? What is God? And it was all lies. All the while, the answer was silence. Where there can be no questions and no need for answers. And not only is that silence what you are, it is what everyone is. The temple of the Holy Spirit is the relationship, not the body, not the imaginary separate mind that thinks it's thinking. The temple of the Holy Spirit is the relationship where you discover the still point, the quiet center, the stately calm, the holy place where thoughts can enter not. The place where you don't know what you are and you're not trying to become anything. And you realize this is what I always was. Only thoughts made me think different. But it's not just what I am. It has to be what everyone is. The temple of the Holy Spirit is the relationship. You are not just the silence. You are the silence that is everything and everyone. And everything and everyone is this silence, is an appearance of this silence, this stillness, this unknowable holiness, where thoughts, no thought, right the way from the first thought of two, of separateness, of other, no thought has ever had any power here in the silence. Not one note in heaven's symphony was missed. All along, this unknowable, holy, changeless presence, not one note was missed here. And this is what you are, not that bunch of thoughts that don't exist and mean nothing. So what is the light everyone is with me? It is unknowable. Thoughts can't say. Salvation is the escape from concepts. It's unknowable. And it's not trying to become anything. If you're trying to become something, you have first of all identified as an illusory self made of thoughts that's trying to become holy. How could an illusion be holy? You are holiness. So when you don't know what you are, you have escaped concepts. And when you're not trying to become something, because you already are as God created you. So when you don't know what you are and you're not trying to become anything, when you see that this is the truth of what everyone is, that's the holy instant. That's shared identity. That's how you stop identifying as a body with a story, a separate self, and choose shared identity in the Holy Spirit. You remember what you are, which is that you don't know what you are. Thoughts were telling you what you were, and you were suffering, and you were making up suffering selves in the world to be with you, to cannibalize and to hate. Okay. And you realized, oh my God, thought I knew what I was, but thoughts, I don't know what I am. Okay. From concepts. And I don't need to become anything. Outside of concepts, there's nothing to become. It's already whole. And this is what everyone is with me. That's shared identity. That's the escape from concepts. That's the holy instant. That's the holy relationship that excludes no one. One holy, unknowable, changeless self is what's true of everyone. Right, Darlana, you have your hand up. So my lovely assistant, Linda, will give you an invite to take yourself off mute. If anyone else would
Okay,
like to
Lana.
ask a question, put your hands up.
Thank you so much. This is really deep. And I've been on some kind of spiritual search since I was 6 years old. And to say I'm exhausted is an understatement. Now, you're saying the relationship of the holy relationship is the pillar of salvation, and that a self, it's not working on myself that is important. It's seeing the holiness in another person, or even any kind of relationship, like even a relationship with the government, as
Yes,
seeing that relationship as holy. That's important, that I have
yes,
to see that relationship, that entity, as the light of the world. But I
yes.
don't know what that.
Well, what's important is you haven't escaped concepts until what you are, that nothing can be said about, is the truth of everyone. That's why the temple of the Holy Spirit is a relationship. It's not enough that you say, oh, I have the Holy Spirit in me. This is fabulous, right? I've got the Holy Spirit. You guys don't. Okay. It's not the Holy Spirit until you see it shining as the truth of everyone already. Doesn't matter whether they know it or not. That's just thought.
Yeah. So how do I go about this? I mean, I try to see people as innocent now. I know enough course to know that, to know that they're innocent and they're delusional and they don't know who they are. They've
Yeah.
forgotten.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Delusional like me, I like to say.
like you, your brother thinks he's a dream,
Yeah.
which means he has dressed himself in concepts and thoughts and thinks that's what he is. He doesn't realize that what he is can't be known by thoughts. Because we've said that kind of knowing is the ego's knowing, where there's a knower and the known. God's knowledge is where there is no knower and known. There is just knowing. There is no knower and known. This is the oneness joined as one. This is non duality. There is no knower and that which is known. There is no thinker and thoughts. This is God's knowledge. So, therefore, what you are as God created you cannot be understood by the ego's knowing, which is dualistic. There is a thinker and the thoughts, there is a knower and the known. So, the truth of what you are is unknowable. You can only be it, but you cannot think about it. You cannot say what it is. That's duality. You can only be the truth. You cannot separate yourself from it, turn it into an object, and tell yourself stories about it. That's duality. That's the
Hmm.
ego's knowing. So you can only be what you are, but thoughts can tell you nothing about it. You can only be it. So the point is, if you think you know what you are, a good person, a bad person, someone who's been on a journey, someone who's exhausted, if you think any of that's true, you don't know what you are. You
Right.
don't, okay? Because you think you know what you are. As long as you think you know what you are, you don't know, you're not being what you are.
Yeah, so that's pretty advanced, though, to be in
No,
that
it's not.
state of,
It's the simplest thing in the world. It says, see that big bunch of thoughts? What does that have to do with you?
yeah,
This is so simple. It's from my perspective, this is the simplest thing in the world to say to you. See that big bunch of thoughts in your mind? That has nothing to do with you. You
nothing to
see,
do with me.
no, nothing to do with you whatsoever. That's the ego. You just think it's you. It's not. Okay. Um, so from my perspective, it's like, do you see everything that thoughts are doing? That's got nothing to do with you. To me, that's the simplest thing in the world to say that to you. It's like, but they've got nothing to do with you. You are the space in which they all arise and fall, and they've nothing to do with you.
Okay.
Okay, so to me, that's the simplest thing in the world. But I do understand that this, to the ego, to the imaginary separate self made of thoughts, this seems unbelievable. And the voice that pretends to be you that's not you will go, you can't not have thoughts. You can't not be thinking. Okay. Um, but that's just the ego saying that. That's not you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like Helen, Schuckman was always in a lot of fear about everything. She was a fearful person. I'm like that. Like I have to go to the store and get a new telephone charger today, and I'm in fear about that even.
Yeah, so that
You
was
know,
just
I'm
concepts. So the reason why there
yeah.
was fear was because she thought she knew who she was. She thought she was a woman. She thought she was a body. She thought she had to go and get a new phone. She thought that was causing her upset. She thought she had a past and a future. Thoughts, concepts. So so because she believed in a self that wasn't real, there was suffering.
Yes, uh-huh.
But that's not what she is, because thoughts can't tell anyone what they are. They're all
So
lies. They're concepts.
so again back to thoughts, believing the thoughts.
Yeah, that's salvation can be seen as nothing more than the escape from concepts. Stop believing your
Okay.
thoughts. Stop believing your thoughts. What you are cannot be conceptualized, cannot be turned into a concept. What your brother is can't be turned into a concept. He can't be a good person or a bad person. He can't be a vicious person or an evil person. They're thoughts. So that's not about what he is. You're making that up with thoughts. The only thing you need to know about your brother is that it cannot be known. Thought cannot attack what he is, cannot limit what he is. You can't know what your brother is. And what your brother is, he doesn't need to become anything. And that's also true of you. But the trap is that you would go, oh, I know what I am. I'm the holy place. The thoughts can enter not. My brother's not, but I am. And that's delusion. That's a spiritualized ego. Next, you'll be starting
Mhm.
an ashram and you'll be a guru and you'll be having people kissing your feet. All right. No, the minute you discover what you are that thoughts cannot touch, thought cannot soil, thought cannot limit, the minute you discover that's the truth of what you are, that is shining as the truth of everyone else already. Everything else was
Yeah.
just your thoughts.
Yeah.
So once you don't believe thoughts anymore, or once they stop, in the beginning, you just don't believe them. It's later that they stop. But all you have to do is not believe thoughts, and suddenly, but there are no specials. No one is special. Of course, the miracle says, you know, in the holy instant, no one is special, as your personal needs impinge on no one to make them seem different. Without the learnings from the past, what's learnings from the past? Thoughts. So without thoughts telling you what your brothers are,
Yeah.
when you see the one unknowable self as the truth of all of them, it's the same self everywhere. Only thoughts said otherwise. And thought is the trickster. That's what you need salvation from, identification with the trickster.
Yeah, exactly.
So heaven is here now. There's no other time. Heaven is here now. There's nowhere else. Atonement can be equated with a total escape from the past. That's the past doesn't exist. It's a big bunch of thoughts in your mind going, oh, that's my past. You don't have a past. The unknowable, the changeless, does not have a past. Those are just thoughts you thought were you. So atonement can be equated with a total escape from the past and a total lack of interest in the future. What's the future? Well, a bunch of thoughts based on the past. None of that's real. What you are is present moment awareness with no past or future. And there's nothing can be said about it, or it's a lie. It has no past or future. Those are thoughts. You need to identify with thoughts to think you're in a self that doesn't exist, that has a past and a future. That's not you.
Okay.
Salvation's nothing more than the escape from concepts. You have a look and go, oh, that's a big bunch of thoughts. So what am I that no thought can say? That doesn't need to become anything. Well, that's already here. The only thing obscuring it is you mixing yourself up with thoughts and thinking you're a self-concept that doesn't exist, and not seeing the light that's shining in everything, which is you. Because you think you're a me. You've gone in there and you've made clothes out of your thoughts, memories, and you've put it all together and go, I'm this kind of person. I'm this kind of tomato, and my friend is that kind of a tomato, and everyone's the same. Forms the
It's
broken
re-
pieces seem to take me nothing. The whole is in each one unknowable, changeless, holy self. And all you have to do is realize that you don't know what you are. All your pain comes from the fact that you think you know what you are. That's self-concept. That's what's hurting you. Now you'll go blaming the body and the world and the other people that you've made up out there, okay? Because you have made up a concept. You think you know what you are. And salvation is quite simply going, hang on, what I am is unknowable. You've left thoughts, you've exited the mind, which also means you've exited time, because it's all thoughts. Once you go, I don't know what I am, and I don't need to become anything, and what I am, everyone is, that's it. That's salvation. Heaven is here. Everything else was just thoughts. It was just thoughts. The real world is already here, where the light that reflects God's light is appearing as a world that means nothing, and it's all still the light. And the only reason that isn't absolutely obvious to you is because you're using thoughts to go, that's one thing, and that's another thing, and that's a good person, that's a bad person, that's a right person, that's past, that's future. That's all made up. That's not what's here. That's your thoughts. That's concept. Salvation is nothing more than realizing none of that's true.
Well, so let me ask you this. As long as the projection onto others and the cannibalization is unconscious, once I know who I am, once I remember who I am, I assume that all that projection and cannibalization will stop automatically.
In this moment, if you feel into this, right? Into it this way. If there are no thoughts in your mind telling you what I am, or if you understand that all the thoughts in your mind are a lie, and you're looking at me with either no thoughts or with the understanding that thoughts are nothing, they don't exist and they mean nothing. So if you're looking at me and disbelieving thoughts or having no thoughts, is it possible to know me as anything other than unknowable?
No, it wouldn't be.
So that's the end of projection.
Right.
Because anything you thought I was thoughts, beliefs, thoughts. That's not what I am. Because there is one light appearing as everything and everyone, and there is no self apart from that. Only thoughts made it seem otherwise. So you're asking about projection. All I'm saying to you is if thoughts stop in your mind in this moment, projection stops. Thoughts are causing projection.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody is behaving and your thoughts are going, that's very bad, that's very evil, and then suddenly the thoughts stop, can you suffer about what somebody else is doing if you have no thoughts telling you that you're suffering?
No,
That's the end of projection. It doesn't matter what the world is doing. You're not projecting onto it anymore, so it can't hurt you. I can be hurt by nothing but my thoughts. Projection is nothing more than your thoughts projected out. But once you don't believe your thoughts anymore, that's the end of projection. Now, there's just what's apparently happening, but it's not good or bad or right or wrong, and it has no effect on me. I would have to entertain thoughts for the world to have an effect on me. The world has no effect on me. I can be hurt by nothing but identifying with thoughts.
that's right. So that's the literal meaning of turning the other cheek. You wouldn't be affected by being slapped.
Yes, the one who suffers over being slapped doesn't exist. It's not you. You can't suffer. Awareness can't suffer. Present moment awareness can't suffer. So, Dalana, in this moment, lesson 8 says when you think you're thinking about the past or the future, they're illusions because they're just thoughts. When you think you're thinking thoughts about the past and future, your mind is blank because it's not really thinking at all.
Mm-hmm.
We've had our reading today that says atonement can be equated with a total escape from the past, thoughts, total
Mm-hmm.
escape from the future, thoughts. Heaven is here, there's nowhere else. So tell me, without thoughts, stories, concepts from the past or the future, is there any evidence of you as a person?
No, and that would be heaven right there.
Yeah, heaven is the absence of me,
Mm-hmm.
false self, the illusory self. All suffering arises on behalf of a self that doesn't exist. It's a concept. It's a bunch
Yeah.
of thoughts that says there's somebody here and this is their story, but you go looking and go, well, where is that one? It doesn't exist. It's not there.
No self, no problem, right?
Yes. Yeah. Which is very
Okay.
triggering for the ego. Um, but we could say it's there's self everywhere. It's a little bit less triggering for the ego. But in experience, it's much more like no self anywhere. Because the idea of self is that I am this self that is apart from that self. Really, once you realize that there's only self everywhere, the idea of identity falls away. It doesn't mean anything. Um, but that's maybe a later stage of realization. But the one I want you to focus on is that you have no problems except that you think you're thinking, and you don't have to continue thinking you're thinking. So
Okay.
if you're suffering, it's because you think you're thinking. It's got nothing to do with what's happening to that imaginary self that's thinking, because there's no self thinking, there's no self there, and you can't suffer. So does that make sense, Darlana?
Sure. Yeah, it
Yeah.
does.
So if you're suffering, then ask yourself, just look at the thoughts in your mind and go, well, I'm not suffering because of the past. I'm not suffering because of what a body did, this one or another one. I'm not suffering because of what's going to happen in 5 minutes' time or 5 years' time. I'm suffering because I think I'm thinking. I'm suffering because I think I can suffer. I am himself made of thoughts that can suffer. But that's not you because you can't suffer. Awareness can't suffer.
Okay.
Can there be any problem with the present moment if you have no thoughts about it?
No, there can't.
Therefore, what hurts you? The world, crucifixion, or your thoughts?
Your thoughts.
That's all that hurts you. So thanks for that, Lana. Let's
Thank
move
you
on.
very much.
My pleasure.
Um,
So we will move on to Vincent. So Linda will give you an invite to unmute yourself, Vincent.
Vincent.
Go
Okay.
for it, Vincent.
Okay. You hear me, right, Keith?
I do.
Okay. I have a question about the concept of the ego after so-called death of the body. Why do so many people who have near-death experiences report that they're having a life review that involves seeing all the so-called
Thank
mistakes
you.
that their ego has
Oh
made
my
during their
God,
life?
it's like a
Lana,
restaurant,
Lana, can I just get you to mute
a
yourself?
fancy restaurant.
Or Linda, if you could do that.
He called me. I hung up on him.
Mm.
I'm full.
Okay. All right. Let me
Girl,
read
you
Okay,
it.
should be a
Ram.
chef somewhere.
No,
You wouldn't like that?
no, I don't like to be hot in the kitchen.
Oh, this is wonderful.
Okay.
I can't
Can I read
find
that?
her.
That's okay. I found her. Right. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Vincent, go
So,
for it.
yeah. So why do so many people who have had near-death experiences report having a life review that involves seeing all the so-called mistakes that their ego has made during their life, even going so far as feeling the reaction of other egos in which they cause pain to? Why is the ego given so much relevance in near-death experiences if it's not real? That's my question.
Because the only thing that's born and lives and dies and goes to the spirit world and reincarnates is the ego.
And yet I'm sorry to interrupt, but some of them feel like, oh, I've received all knowledge of the universe. I was able to travel throughout the universe. Everything made sense. They don't retain it, but suddenly everything makes sense from the beginning to the end. And but that's still their ego that's experiencing that.
Well, that's still a separate self.
Interesting.
Now, so that's the first thing. So stories about an afterlife and reincarnation are comfort stories for the imaginary me. There's no me that was born. There's no me that suffers. There's no me that dies. Those are images, bodies. There's no me that heaven is, heaven is here. There's nowhere else. Heaven is now. There's no other time. So people have, because we're so used to identifying as a self made of thoughts that thinks it's a body and has a past and a future, we think that we're not. This isn't heaven. And that I have somehow come to here, which is different than there. And now, when the body dies, I will go from here to there, and then I will come from there and I'll come back here. But that's all nonsense. That's concepts. Heaven is here. There is nowhere else. Heaven is now. There is no other time. So these are all comfort stones. So I identify as a self that doesn't exist, which is a decision for death. I will identify as the self that dies rather than share identity with all my brothers. That's the decision for death. I will be the thing that dies. Course in Miracles says that it's not the fear of death, it's the attraction of death. If you want to be the insane voice talking to itself in your mind, which isn't you, but if you want to go, that's me, and I'm in the body, and I gotta die, that's a decision for death. That's the attraction of death. You want to be the thing that dies. You could know yourself as the pure awareness outside of thoughts. That's not going to die. It wasn't born. The one who was born is a concept, it's a story. The one who will die is a concept, it's a story. Death is a concept, it doesn't apply to anyone. But you can leave the quiet center. You can jump back into thoughts to make up a self that doesn't exist for yourself. And now you can go, oh my God, I'm so terrified of death. You chose it. You chose to be the thing that'll die that doesn't exist. But then you see, we choose to be the thing that dies, and then we start telling ourselves comfort stories about this thing, this separate self made of thoughts, this individual, that it's going to go on journeys, it's going to go to the spirit world, it's going to be fabulous, going to come back, be someone else. No, that's just someone else. Um, these are comfort stories for the ego. That's why in A Course in Miracles, the question, is there reincarnation? And it pretty much says there's no such thing as incarnation. Never mind reincarnation. You are the light that's appearing as everything. And everything is an appearance of the light that you are. It doesn't matter if that everything is this world or the appearance of another world or the appearance of this body or the appearance of another body. You're the light that's appearing as all of that already. Those are just appearances. So salvation's nothing more than the escape from concepts. Oh, I was here and I went there and it was fabulous. What is that? It's a concept. Oh, I'm a body. It's a concept. Oh, I'm a discarnate spirit. It's a concept. Oh, I know nothing. It's a concept. Oh, I have all the knowledge of the universe. It's fabulous. It's a concept. They're just thoughts.
So you're saying discarnate spirits aren't real, even though people report poltergeist activity and they have evidence of that? Well, none of that is real,
Those are appearances.
even though books are flying across the room and
Those are appearances.
things are knocked off the table. None of that is real.
Just people are getting crucified. There's just appearances.
So this physical phenomenon is not to be taken at all seriously.
Teachers of God. Awareness of dreaming is the real function of God's teachers. They watch the dream figures shift and change, come and go, shift and change, suffer and die, and they're not deceived by what they see. Those are appearances. That's not the Son of God.
Appearances, right? Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not saying, we're not saying that you look out there and that there's nothing. To the mind, there's nothing, right? We're not saying that you look out and you go, oh my God, that doesn't mean anything. That there's nothing there. That's not what this is about. There's only the light of heaven that you are. Your job is to look at the appearances that mean nothing, which are just an appearance of it. Imagine there's a movie screen and this represents heaven. And A Course in Miracles says, you didn't leave heaven. You're not going back to heaven. You are heaven. You are the kingdom of heaven. That's what A Course in Miracles teaches. There's nobody in heaven. You are heaven. Okay, so this movie screen now, that's heaven. And that's what you are. Now, there is a movie, a light show. Dream figures come and go, shift and change, suffer and die. But if you see the one movie screen as the truth of all of them, you are not deceived by what you see. Unity alone is not a thing of dreams. Whichever dream figure I'm looking at, whether it's being crucified or whether it's having books thrown at it by a poltergeist, the only truth to that movie character is the movie screen, which is what I am. Now, unity alone is not a thing of dreams. So I'm looking at a movie and there's all these different people and there's dream figures and they're coming and they're going and they're shifting and they're changing and they're suffering and they're dying. My job is not to say none of that's real. My job is to see the movie screen is real. The movie is not. And the only reason you think the images of the movie are real is because of thoughts. The minute thoughts stop, or you really understand that your only problem is that you're believing thoughts and thinking you're thinking and that the mind isn't you, the minute it's disregarded, everywhere you look, you cannot but see the movie screen. It requires thoughts to start making up stories about who all the characters are and what their past is and what their future is. Once that stops, there's only the movie screen everywhere, and that's what you are. So they watch the dream figures come and go, shift and change, suffer and die, haunted by poltergeists, go on adventures into the other worlds, come back again as someone else. Their appearances. Their appearances. See? And your job is to understand that the appearance is nothing, but it is an appearance of heaven. Your job is to not let the appearances veil the heaven that you are from you, the shared identity that's everywhere. Your job is to allow the images to become transparent so they cannot hide God's Son from you. So last week you asked about the nuclear war. That's another appearance. It's an appearance of heaven. Will you make heaven real, or will you make the images, the light show on the movie screen, will you say that's real? Does that make sense, Vincent?
It does. It does, Keith. It's a little difficult when we're considering the fires in Los Angeles, that the people are seeing the flames coming to their house. There's this knee-jerk reaction to look at it as real momentarily. That would be a difficult thing to separate yourself from, though, right?
No,
Even though
no,
it,
no. What you know, the first thing you need to understand is that when you see, remember, we started off today saying, if you are suffering at all, you don't know what you are. Okay. And if you're making the suffering of your brothers real, you don't know what they are. So the first thing you have to do for you to say, because first of all, you've no idea what's going on in anyone else's mind. Okay. So what you do is you attack yourself as the movie screen to identify as one of the light show pictures with light show thoughts and feelings and stories and memories in the body. Okay, you attack yourself. You forget you're the movie screen. You veil your identity as the movie screen from you to jump into thoughts and be this concept, this image, this appearance. And now what you do is you attack the same movie screen to see it as other movie figures that can suffer, that come and go and shift and change and suffer and die. And you go, they're real. Look at them, look at their suffering. And what you're doing is you're attacking your brother who is the movie screen to see him as an illusion because you saw yourself as one first. Now, you've no idea what's going on in his mind. So what you do is you project the suffering of your own ego out onto him and go, look at the suffering that's going on there. You've no idea what's going on in his mind. If you're looking at your brothers and you're experiencing suffering, where is the suffering?
my idea of what he's suffering, yeah.
So is it in their mind or in yours?
No, it's my concept of projecting, I
So
guess,
whose suffering is it?
into what they're going through and saying, "Oh, I would feel this way," right?
So whose suffering is it?
Yeah, me.
It's the suffering of separateness. It's the suffering of the movie screen that doesn't know what it is and thinks it's made a self out of thoughts and identified with images on a screen. And now you have an opportunity, like your brother thinks he's a dream. You have an opportunity now not to weaken your brother's dream by not sharing it. So now you have the opportunity to know the truth of what your brother is that can't suffer. And by doing that, you refuse to share his dream made of thoughts. You refuse to share it. You see the Holy Son of God, the movie screen, as the truth of him. And that shines, because there's only one mind here, that shines in your brother's mind. That's now accessible to him, to whatever extent he's able to access it at this moment. That holy place where thoughts can enter not. That self that can't suffer. It's shining in your brother's mind. You may never know the effects of what you've just done by refusing to share your brother's dream of him. Okay. And you don't have to. It's none of your business, because unless you did that, you can't know what you are. If you're seeing movie characters out there, that's because you think you're one. It's only when you're seeing the same movie screen behind every movie character, pure awareness, unknowable, the holy place where thoughts can enter not. Only when you're seeing that one movie screen as the truth behind all the movie characters, the dream figures that come and go and shift and change and suffers and die, only by that can you genuinely say you know yourself as the movie screen. Temple of the Holy Spirit is the relationship. What's the truth of you must be the truth of everyone, or it's delusion. It's a spiritualized ego. So I hope that makes sense, Vincent.
Yes, it does, Keith. That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Good. So we shall move on to, is it Lane? Linda will give you an invitation now, Lane.
Did you get it? Line. Let's see.
Should have a way to.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
There you go, Lane.
There we go.
there.
Okay, I've been wanting to ask this question for some time, and I'll try to make it brief. It's got to do with forgiveness. About 30 years ago, I had my first major mystical experience. I was meditating, and I was shown, I had no context for it at the time, but I was shown the moment where I wonder if I could create on my own. And the next thought was, well, of course I can, because when I create, I'm extending the oneness. And I was like, okay. But then the very next moment, I had this abject terror and regret that I had been unloving and unappreciative towards God, and just a total fear of being in God's presence. And then the next thing I knew, I was forgetting knowledge. All knowledge was leaving me. And I was about to reincarnate into the world. And the Holy Spirit, which I didn't know that's what it was at the time, said, worry not, it'll be but for an instant. And my reply was, but it's not going to feel like an instant. and that was, so I had no context for that. 10 years later, I found the course and diligently did the workbook. And I was like, oh my God, I know what that was. And I was shown that. That was so amazing. And during that workbook year, I experienced revelation and was in the presence of God. So I'm aware of God's immense love. And I had gratitude for 2 weeks. And that 2 weeks was just incredible. And I hope to get back there. A few months later, I saw my daughter. She was sitting on the couch, and I saw her body, and I said, as beautiful as you are, dear, that body is not worthy of you and could never contain you. I saw, well, I couldn't see her because she wasn't visible, but I was in her presence. And so what's confused me is after those amazing experiences, and I'm 100% believer in everything you're saying, I still wake up every day and experience the same guilt and fear. And I don't know, where does, obviously that ontological guilt, the massive guilt I was aware of that we escape from through dissociation, I'm still processing that guilt. And where does forgiveness fit into this process you're saying of,
Okay.
these are just my thoughts?
Good question. Okay, so what you had was, you called it revelation. I'm going to say it to you as an awakening. You realized, I mean, am I right in saying that for those 2 weeks, there was just a gratitude and thoughts could do nothing against it? They could say nothing against it. They had no influence on you. There was probably much fewer thoughts, if any.
It was hardly no thoughts, just pure
Right.
peace
Okay.
and joy, and
Perfect.
joining with everything I saw.
Yes, because there was no separation, because what you were had to be what everyone was. So you got that for two
Right.
weeks. Great. We call that a honeymoon period. For 2 weeks, that's what happens when you awaken. You
Mhm.
realize, my God, the minute thoughts stop, you realize identity is a scam. There's no identity. It's made out of thoughts. And then suddenly there's just this freedom and this relief. And then everything you look at is the same thing you are, because it requires thoughts to make the illusion up of a self and another. There's no self and other, right? And so
Right.
in this honeymoon period where there's an awakening, you get this wonderful 2 weeks, 2 months. I once spoke to someone who had it for a year. That's exceptional. Most people get about 2 weeks, 2 months, something like that, right? And it doesn't matter how long you get. You get to experience egolessness. And you get to experience that there's no tiny mad idea. In the course, it says the ego will ask many questions that this course does not answer, like to whom did the impossible happen? How did the impossible happen? But there's no answer, there's just an experience. Well, you had that experience because there was no tiny mad idea, nothing was separate. Okay. Um, so that's an awakening. All right. And that's nothing more than you unbinding yourself from thoughts. That's all that's ever salvation's nothing more than the escape from concepts, right? And you realize there's no tiny marriage here. You realize what the course means when it says there's only an experience. Because the one who's asking, how did it happen? The answer is the one asking the question doesn't exist. It's a thought. Okay. And in the absence of thoughts, or where they're just simply not believed, they can happen because they're nothing, so you don't have to fight them. Um, there's no tiny mad idea, there's no separateness. Um, it was only thoughts that was manufacturing the illusion that it was. So this is the honeymoon period. So this is the awakening. This is the beginning. Unfortunately, it's not the end. You glimpsed egolessness. Okay, and that's what happens when we get this awakening. You glimpse egolessness, and then unfortunately, the ego comes back. Okay. Now, this
Yeah.
is normal and this is right and this is the process, and you must understand that this is how it works. It's very rarely someone would just have that awakening and then the ego's gone forever. That's incredibly rare. There's exceptions like Eckhart Tolle, Byron Katie, but there was a huge amount of suffering that caused them to be done with the ego and heartbeat and never wanted back the separate self, you see. So normally when you have those spontaneous awakens, and again, there's exceptions, okay, but mostly it's born out of a lot of pain and just being done with the ego, done with the separate self. It's like there's nothing in that for me anymore. It's that critical mass of suffering that says I'm done with it, and that's the ego done forever. Um, but for the vast majority of us, we get that honeymoon period, which is pure grace. Um, and now we have to be what we've discovered ourselves to be in the midst of the ego's activity. Course in Miracles says the other way is remaining quiet, even in the midst of the turmoil you may make. You have to now that you know what you are as the stillness, as the quiet, you have to now witness all the mechanics of the ego, all the thought processes that pretend to be a person. You have to witness all the unresolved. It's going to appear that it's unresolved traumas, like emotions that haven't been processed properly in this lifetime. So, every embarrassment, every shame, every disillusionment, every self-hatred, every murderousness, everything that's not resolved is going to have to be seen and forgiven by the quiet.
So the forgiveness is just observing it without putting the cause on the world, recognizing that's the ontological guilt.
Yes, it is. The second shield of oblivion was the world. The first shield of oblivion was the sin, guilt, and fear. So both shields are made up. So what you have is you have non-duality that never ended. You have a thought of separateness that seems to happen. Okay. And then there is the idea of, well, I am this me. There is two. Non-duality is no more. If I really am this me, God has to have been destroyed. He must have. Because you cannot have duality and non-duality. You cannot have oneness and individuality. Okay, so you see, in order to make the illusion of a separate self, and by the way, this separate self we're talking about is all of us, okay, the one mind. This one mind said, well, but there's only non-duality. So then this isn't real, unless God was murdered. Unless God was attacked. God was not murdered. God was not attacked. Separateness is not real. This is a thought, okay? But this apparent self, in order to make itself more believable, told itself a story that God must have been attacked. Non-duality was destroyed. This is a terrible sin. And now we need to be terrified of God coming for vengeance. This isn't true. This is a story. It's like, if there really is two, if there really is a me, then God must have been attacked. So I'm going to believe God was attacked. I'm going to believe I'm guilty. I'm going to believe I have sinned against love and destroyed love. And I'm going to believe that I need to be terrified of God's vengeance. This was made up to prove that there is a self here who is guilty, who has sinned, and who is afraid. But there's no self here to be guilty, to have sinned, or to be afraid. And that's why if you go looking in your mind for sin, you'll find it. If you go looking in your mind for the sinner, there's no one there. There's a me jumps out, a thought that goes, that's me. And you go, hang on, that's a thought. That's a two-letter word. Who is the sinner that the me thought refers to? What do I find? Nothing. You just find stillness, what you are. If you go looking for guilt in your mind, you'll find it. You go looking for the one who's guilty, the me thought will jump out, the concept, the two-letter word, and you go, okay, there's guilt there. Who is the guilty one that the me thought is referencing? And see what you find. Nothing. Because we made up sin, guilt, and fear to prove there was a sinful, guilty, fearful self called me. But when you go looking for the one that's sinful, guilty, and fearful, it doesn't exist. What do you think, Lane, happens to the guilt and the fear when it's clearly seen there's no one there to be guilty or fearful?
Is that the forgiveness process?
It is. Because when you look at what the mind is doing with sin, guilt, and fear, with no judgment, with no opposition,
With love.
yes, which in this world means with forgiveness. Forgiveness is a worldly form of love. So when you look at what the mind is doing with no opposition to it and no judgment to it, the holy place where thoughts can enter not is here. Pure awareness. What you knew yourself to be, Lane, when thoughts had no power over you. Just pure present moment awareness. No identity, just presence. Okay, so the minute you look at what the mind is doing, and we mean the ego mind, the one that thinks it's thinking and has a past, the one that's full of concepts. The minute you look at all of that, including the concept of sin, guilt, and fear, because guilt and fear are just concepts. When you look at everything the mind is doing with no opposition to it, no judgment of it, no fighting, no resistance, you just let it be. That holy place thoughts can enter not is here. You have slipped out of mind identification. You have left time, because it's made about thoughts. And you know yourself as this presence with no past or future, the unknowable that no thought can soil. And you realize that sin, guilt, and fear in the mind, there's no identity in that. It doesn't apply to anyone because it has nothing to do with this self that forgives. It has nothing to do with the holy place where thoughts can enter not. And now that sin, guilt, and fear has nothing to stick to anymore. There's no false self. There's no imagined separate self identity, the self concept for those thoughts to stick to. They must collapse.
Okay.
That's forgiveness. Forgiveness is clearly seeing there is no separate self there to be sinful, guilty, or fearful. It's not there. There is what's looking for the sinful, guilty, fearful self and can't find it. And there's no sin, guilt, and fear here.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So forgiveness is how you come home to yourself from concepts. And in this holy place where thoughts can enter not, there is no sin, guilt, and fear. And as you come home here, the sin, guilt, and fear that was arising on behalf of a concept, a self that's not really there, a me that's an imaginary thought-made self, each time you come home to the truth of what you are, outside of concepts, whatever sin, guilt, and fear was coming up has to fall because there's nothing to stick to anymore. It needs an imaginary self to stick to. And that's the important thing about A Course in Miracles. Everyone thinks it's, oh, I, the self, need to become holy, need to become a miracle worker, need to return to heaven. No, that's not what A Course in Miracles is saying. A Course in Miracles says, through him, the Holy Spirit, the stillness, the holy place that thoughts can enter not, which is the truth of what you are in consciousness, through him, who is yourself, capital S, through him, you learn how to forgive the self you think you made and let it disappear. That's the process. You already are as God created you. How could you have to become something? No, you have to undo your identification with a self you think you've made, a separate self identity that doesn't exist. All you have to do is let that go. How do I let it go? You forgive it. In the total forgiveness of it, you discover the peace that's here that thoughts can't touch. And as you make your stand here, there is no separate self for sin, guilt, and fear to stick to, and it collapses. Because it's made up. So sin, guilt, and fear was made up to try and prove there was a made up self. But the whole thing is made up. That's the holy place where thoughts can enter not. That's not made up. Thoughts can't touch here. And this literally is the reflection of the light of heaven, which is everywhere. It's not enough for you to know that you are this presence without past or future, because they're just thoughts, right? Concepts. It's not enough for you to know this is what you are. You must know this is what everything and everyone is. That's why the temple of the Holy Spirit is the relationship. Otherwise, you still think you're a separate self. Until you know that the emptiness, the unknowability, the holiness, the wholeness, until you know that what's here is everywhere and what's everywhere is here, because one light's appearing as everything and it's unknowable, until you know that, you haven't discovered the temple of the Holy Spirit. But the minute you realize, hang on, I'm not a separate self, then you have to look out in the world and go, there's no separate self. One holiness, one unknowable Son of God, one light of heaven is appearing as all of this, and it means nothing. Behind this movie is the movie screen, and that's what all of us are. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
So, Lane, you have had the awakening, which is wonderful. That's your honeymoon. Okay. Now what you have to do, because you've discovered what you are, which isn't a concept, which isn't a thought, all right, where there's no suffering, this is the right mind. Now the cork has been popped on the wrong mind. All the sin, guilt, fear, regret, inferiority, shame, everything is going to have to come up and be seen by what you are that is forgiveness, what you are that cannot judge, what you are that cannot fixate. See, the false self has to fixate. This is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, this is holy, this is unholy. It must judge. Okay, but you discovered when there was the awakening that what you are doesn't judge. They're just thoughts to do with what I am. Now you have to be this in total forgiveness of the imaginary self. You must learn to be to remain quiet, even in the midst of the turmoil the ego makes, that it be dissolved. So all you're now doing is you now have to visit, because you now know what you are, but there's still ego fixations. There's still ways that you still identify as a body. There's still beliefs you hold about a self and another, and there's and now all this has to be seen and forgiven, that it be dissolved in the forgiveness. Until nothing is left but presence.
But
Everywhere.
all that will eventually run out.
Yeah, because they're just appearances, they're just thoughts. They don't mean anything. It's just that you still have fixations with them.
Okay.
You had a grace period of 2 weeks where all the fixations seemed to go, and there was just freedom and love and oneness. So that was beautiful. And that is what you're going back to, but don't chase it as memory. That's the trap. You see, because now you have to be this even in the midst of all the ego fixations.
So I'm just going through the process of
Yeah.
forgiving my unforgiven guilt. And
You
accepting
can
my
never.
identity that I was shown.
Yeah. What's important to understand is that what you are can't oppose anything. It's not possible. So if you think back on that 2 week period, was there opposition to anything?
Not at all.
What you are cannot oppose. Therefore, the only way for you to remember what you are in the midst of the turmoil that your ego is making is that you can't oppose it. That's forgiveness. Forgiveness means oppose nothing, resist nothing, push nothing away from you, embrace all experience. That's what forgiveness is. Oppose nothing, resist nothing. You cannot remember what you are as presence until there's no opposition to the world, to thoughts, to feelings, to memories. You can't, the minute you oppose, the minute you fixate, you don't know what you are. But the minute you look at what the mind is doing and you don't label it and you don't fixate about it, you don't call it one thing or another, the minute you allow it to be exactly as it is, the minute nothing is opposed, the quiet center is here. And it's here, even in the midst of what thoughts and feelings and stories are doing. And your only job is don't resist any of them. Oppose nothing, resist nothing. Don't even entertain a concept of forgiving it. Just allow, the Course says, what can frighten me when I allow all things to be exactly as they are? That's forgiveness. And in that forgiveness, in that non-opposition, is discovered the pristine place, which is the truth of everyone, that shines everywhere. That's what forgiveness is for. But you can only get here through total non-opposition. So in previous podcasts, we've talked about the trap of, oh, I'm having an ego attack. What's my forgiveness formula? How do I fix it? How do I get rid of the bad feelings? Oh, Holy Spirit, take it off me, take it off me, take it off me. Okay, that's hopeless. That's opposition. So there's no forgiveness there. What can frighten me when I allow all things to be exactly as they are? The world, ego thoughts, ego feelings, ego fixations, ego resistance. The minute there's no opposition to it, I've exited mind identification. I've taken the salvation from concepts of the holy instant through total non-opposition. What forgives the unforgiving thing, which is just a bunch of thoughts, called Linda, it's not you. What forgives the unforgiving thing cannot be the unforgiving thing. You're home in the holy instant. And non-opposition brings you here every time. Forgiveness means resist nothing, oppose nothing. In my defenselessness, my safety lies. The safety, which is the truth of what I am, which is invulnerable, but it's not just what I am, it's what everyone is. Does that make sense, Lane?
Very, very helpful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Guys, thanks a million for your attention. We will do it all again next week, and we will catch up in the Facebook group. Before then, whatever else you're getting up to today, enjoy. Heaven is here. There's nowhere else. Heaven is now. There's no other time.